You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship with David C. Baker and Blair Enns.
Blair, we did an episode where I ranted about, do I pay for referrals that people send me? And you thought I was writing about this, right?
You call it a referral system, building a referral system. Oh yeah, everybody wants a system to get more referrals, but no, your system is how to give referrals. You're always upside down on everything.
Yeah. So you decided, let's do one on how to ask for referrals. And you read all these books and you discovered somewhere you say in here, these shouldn't have been books, they should have been blog posts. Do we have enough for a podcast episode then?
Oh, it's so much for a podcast. But yeah, as I was reading these books, and a couple I'd read before, and when I say read...
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. It took you about 15 minutes a book?
Well, not 15 minutes, but who is it? I think it's Ryan Holiday's got 3 different methods for reading a book. He calls it an A book, a B book, and a C book. So an A book, you read cover to cover. So all fiction books I would read cover to cover. Maybe 20% of business books I would read cover to cover. Some of them I intend to skim, and I forget the categorizations, but some you just read first chapter,
Yeah.
last paragraph of each chapter. That's one version of skimming it. In some books, you start out thinking, okay, I'll just skim this, and you end up reading everything. Greg Alexander's book, The Boutique, was like that for me. I read it cover to cover, word for word. But all of these referral books, as I was reading them quickly and rereading some of them, I was texting you saying, and I'm not going to name names, but none of these books should have been books because they were mostly filler. One of them has the word referrals in the title. It doesn't even talk about referrals. It conflates the idea of a lead with a referral.
Oh.
So the whole book promises something that it doesn't pay off. Some of these books are actually very good, but they could have been 20-page books instead of 250-page books. So what's the lesson? It's not a deep topic. And yet, I feel like we could probably talk about this for an hour. We won't.
It's not a deep topic, but it is the primary lead gen plan for a lot of firms out there.
Yeah, and I'm sure you experience this too, where, as I do, I ask a client of ours, an agency owner, okay, where do you get new clients from? And the most common answer is referrals and word of mouth. And to me, that's just code for no idea, no plan. You hear that?
Yeah. What's the distinction between referrals and word of mouth? Like referrals to me, it almost sounds sort of intentional where you have a plan.
Yeah.
Word of mouth sounds even sloppier. It's like somebody sat down at a browser. It's sort of like organic search, right?
Yeah. It's really reputation, and we could unpack that, all of the things that you do to increase your reputation, to drive inbound inquiries, and I guess we've touched on this in various episodes, but where referrals are direct, and the idea implicit in the subject of referrals is a program for soliciting referrals, for formalizing how you go about getting referrals. So I hear this a lot, we get work from referrals and word of mouth. Or just referrals, and you dig deep and you realize, there is no plan. There's nothing codified here. They can't point to where these referrals come from. But then on the other hand, every once in a while, you meet a firm that is a referral generating machine where they generate most of their new business from referrals. And those firms are worth paying attention to.
Do you remember Dick Truitt of the PR world?
Yeah. 20 years ago, when you first invited me to speak at MYOB in Cabo San Lucas, he was also speaking, and he was the former speechwriter for Richard Nixon, I think, right?
Yeah, and he has a very good approach to referrals, so it'll be interesting to kind of compare what you've come up with, what he did. And to your point, I've met a lot of people who rely on referrals, but I've never met anybody other than Dick who had a plan for it.
I have a friend who runs a solo consulting practice. He does over $1 million a year, has no employees. Every piece of new business is from a referral.
And there's a plan behind it?
Yes, absolutely.
Ah, that's interesting. Okay. All right. So before we get into some specific suggestions that you might have, you think that referral strategies make sense for a certain type of firm more than others, right?
Yeah. And I'll be honest that I've been thinking about referrals for years. Like, we're a sales training organization. We should have a point of view, let alone a training module on referrals. And we haven't, because to me, at the end of the day, I think the model for soliciting referrals is really simple, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But in preparation for this, I also wrote a post on this on winwithoutpitching.com. We'll post a link in the show notes. I was thinking about, okay, why is it that some firms, referrals aren't even on their kind of ladder of lead generation? They're not in their lead generation plan. And then you have these other firms that live and die by referrals. And it occurred to me, after thinking through this a while, that certain firms are more ripe for referrals as a lead generation source. So I've identified 4 characteristics of firms that are able to leverage referrals well.
Yeah. And that starts with?
So the first characteristic is they sell strategic services to senior people. Now, years ago, I heard you say either directly to me in a conversation or something you wrote or something you said from a stage that there's a declining effect of referrals because referrals get handed down or across laterally over time. We only take recommendations from people that we look up to, or at the very least, we see as equals. We don't take referrals from people that we see as kind of beneath us, socioeconomically, the status in the sector we serve, whatever it is. So there is this kind of declining effect. Therefore, the more senior the person that you're dealing with, the higher their kind of esteem in yours and other people's eyes, the better the referral source. Therefore, if you're selling to entrepreneurs and senior executives, you're more likely to get referrals from existing clients. If you are selling design to brand managers, you're less likely to get referrals. And if you do, the value of those referrals are going to decline actually quite quickly. So the more senior the people you're dealing with, the more likely it is that referrals are effective for you.
If you'd asked me to predict that one, I probably would have predicted the opposite, where I would have said referrals are more likely when you're just starting out and so on. But I think you're onto something, which would not have occurred to me before. But the more well-positioned you are, the more referrals sort of make sense. And I would have guessed the opposite.
Well, if you think of the most senior clients out there, so people who are in very senior positions at large companies, you think about, okay, what are the marketing channels that work for these people?
Yeah.
They're not spending time on Twitter. They're probably not reading much on LinkedIn. They're reading the Wall Street Journal. They're reading Harvard Business Review. Maybe they're going to some very select conferences. They're in this like really elite strata of individuals that pass secrets back and forth to each other.
Here's a good example of what I think you just said. I didn't draw on that line until you were talking. So when I'm advising a firm around their positioning, if we're anywhere near something that's related to the PE field, you want to have a great relationship with the PE funders, because at some point they're going to say, all right, we'd like to fund your startup, but we really would feel better about this if you would work with this marketing firm to help you with the go-to-market strategy. And that would be an example of a referral from a very high-level source, where in some cases the funding is at least seems to be partially contingent on that. And I have probably 4 or 5 clients where that's true, where they don't have a sales plan to all of those startups.
Yeah.
They try to be known by them, but they try to have a referral plan or a marketing plan to the PE funders. And now they're getting multiple clients from one source. But more than that, it's not just about efficiency, it's about the weight of the referral too.
Yeah, again, there's a certain strata, and I know a lot of firms that have tried to kind of crack that nut, and only a few that have, where you get this endorsement from the private equity firm, or sometimes it's venture capital too. So at the end of the day, if you're dealing with really senior people, when it comes to lead generation, you really only have 2 strategies. One is to get famous.
I'll take that one. Whatever the second one is, I'll take that one.
Or get referrals. And I don't mean small f famous. I mean New York Times bestseller famous. I mean being interviewed on television show famous. I mean really big famous, getting invited to maybe not necessarily Davos, but the rung of stages right below the very top. And of course, including the very top, like an actual TED Talk, a TEDx is helpful, but an actual TED Talk, you're either that level of famous where these senior people reach out to you, or your name is getting handed from person to person via referrals.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you just sort of dashed my dreams, but thank you very much for all of those.
That's why I'm here.
All right. So the first one, just to repeat, is about selling strategic services to senior people. If you do that, if you're connected at a pretty high level, then referrals could make more sense as a strategy. The second one is if you are in a market where your clients talk to each other and thus the word spreads more easily. I kind of call this the water cooler effect, right? And sometimes you have to think about vertical versus horizontal, and you've actually thought about this in those terms as well as some others too.
Yeah, so if you think of this as a characteristic of firms that can leverage referrals, their clients talk to each other. It doesn't mean that they necessarily do the second part, which is refer easily. So you would assume a firm that is focused on a vertical like automotive or retail or something, even banking, hospital care, whatever it is, you would assume that those clients in those verticals talk to each other. And that's probably true, but it does not naturally follow that they are referring firms like yours to each other. Let me ask you, have you ever been in a situation where a client of yours, either you'd asked for kind of a quote or a referral or something, where it just came up in conversation where they said, I really want you to be a secret. I don't want other firms in my space to know about you.
Yeah, because you're so bad. I don't want you to impact other firms I love. No, they've said that. I don't think any of them have been serious. They've joked about it, but I guess I don't have enough experience to know. But it seems like the industry you and I serve, they're so generous with each other. They want what's best for other people, but certainly they've joked about it.
I think in my field, selling, it can be a little bit more competitive.
Oh, yeah.
And I have heard many times, I really don't want my competitors to know about you. But I don't hear it so much anymore. I think this is a function of firms being more specialized these days. So
right.
If you're in a peer group with other agency owners, the idea that you would compete with each other, even if you're in the same geographic location, is far less likely today. Therefore, you're more likely to refer. But I think there's certain verticals that actually do refer easily. And the first ones that come to mind are those that sell non-rivalrous goods or services, like entertainment. I don't know if this meets the technical, like economic definition of a non-rivalrous good or service, but a movie is non-rivalrous. Like you might go to a movie about vampires, and then I come along as another studio and I make another movie about vampires. It doesn't mean that you're not going to go to my movie as well. In fact, you're kind of likely to go to my movie as well. So in that space, movies and television shows, et cetera, they do compete with each other, but the consumers of those goods or services are not in a position where they can only consume one of them. In fact, if they consume one, they're more likely to consume another. Therefore, it's beneficial, mutually beneficial for us to be working with the same quality players. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's not a zero-sum game.
Right.
It's almost like, N+1 just goes forever and ever. I don't tend to define this one based on vertical or horizontal. I tend to define it based on whether there are conferences. And to me, that's the best indicator of whether referral strategies are going to work. Most conferences are organized around a vertical focus, but some of the largest, in fact, the very largest one in the world, Dreamforce, is a horizontal conference. So if there's a conference for what you do, then I think probably referrals make more sense, just logically anyway.
I think that's a good way to think about it. But basically, if your clients talk to each other and refer easily, obviously, then that makes sense for you to think about leveraging referrals.
You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship. Your hosts are David C. Baker, author, speaker, and advisor to owners of expert firms, and Blair Enns of Win Without Pitching, the sales training and coaching program for creative entrepreneurs. For more information, go to twobobs.com. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling a friend and rating us in your favorite podcast app. Now back to David and Blair.
And then the third one that you note here is that sometimes this makes sense if there's a personal component to the service or value. Is that because you're sort of putting some of your personal reputation behind it? Is that part of it or what?
Yeah, there's something about this personal component to the value of your service that makes somebody more willing to talk about it and refer you. I always think of like the CEOs of these corporations who tend to be pretty good at screening out all the noise, social media, a lot of the channels that many of the listeners would push their content through. and they take the recommendation of their peers, as we've already talked about. But there's something about, like, if you're in the finance space, and I said to you before we press record that I just popped into a private workshop we're delivering for a large financial planning organization, which is not in our target market, but we do a lot of work in this space. They see that our work translates. In that space, they lean heavily on referrals as a lead source. I've referred my financial advisor to others, and he was referred to me. There's just something about that space where it's not just business success. This person has had an impact on my life, and I think you should know about it. There's something more meaningful there rather than just somebody who will perform a business task.
Yeah, this person didn't just remodel my kitchen. I've trusted our family investments with this person.
Yeah, and sometimes there's a privacy component or a discretion component about it where it's like, hey, I know when it comes to personal finance, I live in a small town. I know he's not going to talk to other people, etc. And I think that applies to the famous and the wealthy as well. It's like, hey, I've got this guy. He's used to dealing with people like us. Mm-hmm. He comes with my stamp of approval. It's not absolutely necessary that there be this personal component to your service or value for you to leverage referrals. But when you do, it seems to become easier.
Yeah, right. So it may not apply to a firm that does CPG packaging, but if a firm does change management or culture work or something where the failure attaches to the person individually, then you could see how a referral would make more sense in that other environment. I mean, you could see a referral making sense with either, but in your world, what you're describing here is that if there's a personal component to it, it's something worth pursuing. And then the last one you have is, even if none of these things necessarily apply, you might have a disciplined approach to it, in which case you could apply it to most anything or not.
Yeah, I don't know about most anything, but when we started diving into, okay, can we come up with something on referrals that has a novel point of view that is more than what everybody else is just doing out there? I couldn't find anything other than Robert Cialdini's work on reciprocity, I think, is really applicable to the work of referrals, the point of when do you ask for a referral. But if you want the universal framework for how to get more referrals, it's 3 steps. And I learned this from Strategic Coach. And in the post that I wrote recently, and again, we'll post a link in the show notes, I talked about my experience with Strategic Coach and how I saw them do this. So here's the 3-step framework that I learned for leveraging referrals. Number 1, do good work.
We could stop right there.
Number 2, say please. Number 3, say thank you. And we're not going to unpack that here. I unpack that in the post in quite amount of detail. But really, at the end of the day, that's it. First of all, people don't refer work that isn't good. So the table stakes are you have to do good work. And then you ask and say please, and then you say thank you at the end. Now, these 2 steps of say please, say thank you, there can be a lot of nuance around that. How do you ask? When do you ask? How do you say thank you? When do you say thank you? So the variables in those 2 steps are important, but really at the end of the day, you want a business that has some of the characteristics that we've already talked about before. You're selling strategic services to senior people. Your clients talk to each other and refer easily. It's ideal if there's a personal component to the service or the value you deliver. And then if some of those variables are in place, follow this 3-step framework. Do good work, say please, say thank you, and formalize it. Work out the details of when and how do you ask and when and how do you say thank you. Formalize it. And even gamify it if you can for your staff and maybe even your clients. And I talk a little bit about that in the post as well.
When you look back over the work you've done with clients, how many people would you say have regularly sent you referrals, even without you asking them, like multiple instances of the same person sending you a referral over the last decade or so? I've got a number from my side.
It's common to hear that somebody was referred by somebody, but the idea, that steady referral source where you hear from this person over and over again, it's pretty rare. I would say less than 5.
5 is my number. And I've reached out to each one of these and said thank you, because all of the referrals, I didn't ask for any of them. They were all great referrals. and sent a gift, a thank you gift, and tried to kind of get inside their head. And what's interested me in each case is that none of these referral sources think it's really all that unusual. It's just something they do naturally. It's what they do with everybody. And they don't think it's unusual. It's just kind of interesting to get inside their head about it.
Well, to our previous episode on this point, you're very good at that. And when I was thinking of individuals, I was thinking of just clients. And there are people outside of our client space, professional colleagues and friends, and you being one of them, maybe even at the top of that list. I do get a lot of referrals from you. And you're very good at giving referrals, hence the previous episode. I guess I owe you a gift. God damn it, Baker.
Well, that's kind of what I've been beating around the bush about.
Fine.
It sure
fine.
took you a while to figure it out. Should we pay fees to people that send us great referrals?
Well, we talked about this in the previous episode. I personally don't think there's anything intrinsically wrong with referral fees. And we didn't say that there was in the last episode. I think the danger with referral fees is hiding it. And I've said in that episode, my father used to work in commercial crime, and he used to say to me, a kickback, which is a crime, the definition is a secret commission.
Right.
So I feel like if there's a commission being paid, if there's a fee being paid, you shouldn't be shy about disclosing that fact. You shouldn't hide that fact. Now, if you're paying a referral fee, the party to whom you were referring this other party says, hey, do you guys have a financial relationship? You absolutely have to declare that you do. But if they ask you, well, how much are you paying that person? I personally don't think you have an obligation to say that. I think that obligation is on the person you're referring in. Now, that's just me. I might be wrong. One of my last points on this is, like all issues of money, this is highly personal. Mm-hmm. And my interpretation of it and your interpretation and the listener's interpretation of like what's wrong, what's ethical, what's unethical, I think they all might be different.
Yeah, I think they probably would, at least in the little small details, maybe not the heart of it.
I do think that referral fees are a bit like referrals in that it either works for you or it doesn't. Referrals should be a very big part of your lead generation plan. Maybe like your major lead gen activity is referrals. So it's right at the top of your list. Or it might not even be on there at all, or it's way down there as an afterthought. It's one or the other. You're kind of all in, or you're focusing your attention elsewhere. And I think it's the same with referral fees. You either go all in on referral fees or you don't. Now, I know some firms, I can think of one in particular, but I know more, that have paid over $500,000 in referral fees to one individual.
Yeah, I know that too. I know of a firm that's done more than that, like by $800,000.
So they're all in on this idea. Personally, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know if I can articulate why, and I don't think that makes it wrong. Maybe I'm just erring on the side of caution here, but I think you're all in on the idea of referral fees or you're not.
Yeah. Well, in the case of this firm, it turned into the equivalent of a client concentration issue because so much of their work came through that one referral relationship. And then that referral relationship dried up, not because of anything going wrong, but that person lost their job and wasn't in a position to do it anymore. And all of a sudden, it almost cratered the firm. It was just like a client concentration issue.
Well, there's something in that because you said that person lost their job. So this is somebody who is in somebody else's employment. And that's the situation I was thinking of. Maybe we're thinking of the same firm. This person is employed somewhere else in a senior position and is referring opportunities to this agency.
Right.
And they're paying this person who has a job hundreds of thousands of dollars on the side. It's just a little bit uncomfortable to me. But again, that's just me. Maybe every party in that situation, including this person's employer, is perfectly fine with it.
So what's the difference between a formal referral plan and an affiliate program?
An affiliate program is basically really formalized. It's typically tied to more productized services firms.
Right.
Like I've got a book, Pricing Creativity, that's priced at between $100 and $320 a year. And every 6 months or so, I get somebody ask, they say, hey, I refer this book all the time. Do you have an affiliate program? Meaning, can I get a special link? And every time that somebody that I refer buys the book, I get paid. I can log in. I can see what those sales have generated. And there are different ways that you can handle an affiliate program. I rethink it every year, and every year I reject it. I think affiliate programs are also like referral fees and just referrals in general. You go all in on it and build your business around it, or you don't do it at all. I might revisit it next year and change my mind. But currently, the way I think about it in my business, it's like, nah, I don't want to dabble in affiliate marketing. It's either not at all, or maybe one day I'll flick the switch and be all affiliate based.
Well, and the government has decided that where our ethics are lacking, they're going to require disclosure of affiliate links and so on too. So that's kind of an interesting twist on things. So tell me if this is a true statement to finish this up. Wherever you are, whatever your focus is, it's good to think about the role of referrals in your marketing strategy.
True statement.
Okay. But it'd be a very rare firm that could rely on this as their primary method of new business.
Yes. And if you're in that category, if you're getting a decent amount of referrals, yours might be one of them. Just think of that list of the 4 different characteristics of firms that leverage referrals. And is that you? Does that sound like you? And if it sounds like you, you're probably already benefiting from some referrals. It might be time to go all in and see if you can't make that your primary lead generation source by formalizing it.
Right. But relying on referrals as some passive strategy because you don't have a marketing plan is not what we're suggesting here.
Correct.
There was a little hesitation there. And next week we'll...
Yeah, it's correct. Like if I ask you, where do your clients come from? And you say referrals, you should have that codified.
Right.
And if you haven't codified it, you're either being disingenuous, you really mean, I have no idea where business comes from, or you're sitting on an opportunity that you really should capitalize on by formalizing it with this simple 3-step approach. Do good work, say please, say thank you, formalize how all of that's done.
Well, thank you for saving us from a book on referrals by Blair.
I do the reading so you don't have to.
Thank you, Blair.
Thanks, David.
Thank you for listening to Two Bobs with David C. Baker and Blair Enns. Read episode notes and transcripts at twobobs.com. That's the number 2, BOBS.com.